Linda Hayes sat at her monitoring station, staring at the screens that displayed thousands of signals from across the solar system. She had been working this shift for 6 hours, and most of that time had been spent watching routine communications between mining stations and transport ships. Nothing unusual ever happened on the night shift at the Mars orbital station. Then something changed. A new signal appeared on her screen, different from anything she had seen before. It was weak and kept breaking apart, but it was definitely there. Linda leaned forward and adjusted her equipment, trying to get a clearer reading. The signal was coming from outside human space, from somewhere far beyond any known colony or outpost. She reached for her communication device and called Commander Jack Morrison. Within minutes, he arrived at her station with several other crew members. Jack looked at the signal patterns and immediately knew this was important. He ordered Linda to record everything and called for more specialists to help analyze the data. Amy Rodriguez arrived next. She was the best tech specialist on the station, known for solving problems that stumped everyone else. Amy connected her personal equipment to the monitoring system and began running analysis programs. The signal was clearly artificial, created by intelligent beings, but it was not human. It was alien. The team worked through the night trying to decode the message. Amy wrote new programs to break down the signal into smaller parts. She compared it to every known language pattern in human databases, looking for similarities. Hour after hour passed with little progress. Some team members suggested giving up, but Amy refused to stop. She knew this message was important. Just before dawn, Amy made a breakthrough. She found repeating patterns in the signal that matched mathematical sequences. Mathematics was universal, and she used these sequences as a key to unlock the rest of the message. Slowly, the alien words began to make sense. Amy's hands shook as she read the translation appearing on her screen. It was a distress call. The message came from a species calling themselves the Valari. They were under attack and their civilization was dying. They had sent signals to every nearby star system, hoping someone would help them. No one had answered. Earth was their last hope. Jack read the translated message and felt a chill run down his spine. The Valari described their attackers as the Krathun Dominion, a powerful empire that had been conquering systems for hundreds of years. The Krathun had surrounded the Valari homeworld and were bombing civilian cities. Millions had already died. The Valari had no real military and could not defend themselves. They were begging for help from anyone who would listen. Jack immediately sent the message to Earth. Admiral Patricia Cole received it at the Defense Command headquarters and called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. Representatives from every major nation gathered to discuss what should be done. The council chamber was filled with heated arguments. Many council members were afraid. They argued that humanity should not get involved in alien wars. Earth had just begun exploring space beyond the solar system. Getting into a fight with a powerful empire could bring destruction to human worlds. Some said the Valari situation was tragic, but not Earth's problem. Others worried it might be a trap designed to lure human ships into an ambush. Admiral Cole listened to all the arguments but remained silent. She knew the decision would be difficult. Earth had the technology to help, but using that technology meant risking human lives. She looked around the room at the worried faces of the council members. Then Captain Daniel Wright stood up. He was a decorated officer who had served in space for 20 years. Daniel had a reputation for being both brave and thoughtful. When he spoke, people listened. He reminded the council that humanity had always helped those in need. Every major religion and philosophy on Earth taught compassion for the suffering. Ignoring this distress call would mean abandoning the values that made humanity worth defending. Daniel talked about the times in human history when people had stood by and done nothing while others suffered. Those moments were remembered with shame. He asked the council if they wanted future generations to look back and see them as cowards who had the power to save lives but chose to do nothing. His words were simple but powerful, and they changed the mood in the room. The debate continued for hours, but slowly opinions began to shift. More council members spoke in favor of helping the Valari. They agreed that sending a military force was risky, but the risk was worth taking. Finally, Admiral Cole called for a vote. The decision was close, but the majority voted to send an expeditionary force to Valari space. Admiral Cole immediately began planning the mission. She chose the EDF Valkyrie for the job. The Valkyrie was the newest warship in Earth's fleet, equipped with advanced weapons and powerful engines. It was designed for deep space combat and long missions far from home. The ship could hold a crew of 300 and carried enough supplies to operate independently for months. For the mission commander, Admiral Cole selected Captain Daniel Wright. His speech to the council had impressed her, and she knew he had the courage and intelligence needed for such a dangerous assignment. Daniel accepted the command with honor. He chose Jack Morrison as his executive officer, knowing Jack's experience would be valuable. The crew of the Valkyrie prepared for departure. Engineers checked every system twice. Supply officers loaded food, medicine, and ammunition. Weapons specialists calibrated the railguns and missile systems. Pilots ran simulation after simulation, practicing combat maneuvers. Everyone knew this mission was different from anything Earth had attempted before. Amy Rodriguez volunteered to join the crew as a communications specialist. She wanted to make direct contact with the Valari and learn more about their situation. Admiral Cole approved her transfer, and Amy packed her equipment for the journey. 3 days after receiving the distress signal, the Valkyrie was ready to launch. The crew gathered in the main briefing room for final instructions. Captain Wright stood before them and explained the mission clearly. They were going to help people who could not help themselves. The journey would be dangerous and some of them might not return. But they were doing something important, something that mattered. The crew responded with determination. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. They believed in what they were doing. As the Valkyrie left Earth orbit and jumped into faster-than-light travel, everyone aboard knew they were making history. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they were about to show the galaxy what humans did when someone called for help. The Valkyrie traveled through space for 12 days before reaching the coordinates from the distress signal. When the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the crew saw a star system that looked dead. Scanner readings showed debris fields where space stations used to be. Several moons had been stripped of resources. The Valari homeworld appeared in the distance, surrounded by enemy ships. Captain Daniel Wright ordered the ship to stay hidden behind a large asteroid while they gathered information. Lieutenant Jake Bennett worked at the tactical station, scanning for threats. He counted 12 Krathan warships in orbit around the planet and detected weapons platforms on several moons. The Krathun had complete control of the system. Amy Rodriguez began sending careful messages toward the asteroid belt, where the Valari had said survivors were hiding. She used the same mathematical patterns from the original distress call, hoping the Valari would recognize them and respond. For 2 hours there was nothing. Then a weak signal came back from a hollowed-out asteroid. Dr. Helen Foster rushed to the communications station. She was a first contact specialist who had studied alien psychology for years, though she had never actually met an alien before today. Helen worked with Amy to establish a translation protocol. Slowly they began to have a real conversation with the Valari survivors. The voice that came through the speakers sounded tired and frightened. The Valari representative said his name was something humans could not pronounce, so he asked them to call him Vale. He was shocked that anyone had answered their distress call. The Valari had sent messages to 40 different star systems. Every species they contacted had either ignored them or sent back messages saying they could not help. Vale explained that most species in this part of the galaxy were peaceful traders. They had small defense forces meant for policing pirates, not fighting wars. When the Krathan Dominion came, most civilizations simply surrendered. Fighting back seemed impossible against such a powerful empire. Captain Wright asked Vale to tell them everything about the Krathun. Vale described an empire that had conquered 15 star systems over 300 years. The Krathun used overwhelming force to break any resistance quickly. They enslaved populations and stripped conquered worlds of valuable resources. No one had ever defeated them or even slowed them down. Lieutenant Bennett analyzed the tactical data Vale provided. The Krathun warships were large and heavily armed, but their weapons were basic energy lasers and plasma cannons. Their shields were strong against energy weapons but had never been tested against kinetic weapons like railguns. The Krathun ships also moved slowly, designed for intimidation rather than speed. Dr. Helen Foster asked about Valari biology and culture. Vale described his people as peaceful scholars who loved art and philosophy. The Valari had never developed advanced weapons because they never needed them. When conflicts arose between Valari cities, they resolved them through negotiation and compromise. War was something they had only read about in ancient history. Vale grew curious about Earth and asked Helen to describe humanity's homeworld. Helen hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, she decided honesty was best. She explained that Earth was a high-gravity world with extreme weather, dangerous predators, and diseases that had killed millions throughout human history. Humans had evolved to be tough and adaptable because their planet was so hostile. There was a long silence from Vale's end. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different, filled with something close to awe. He said the Valari lived on a world with gentle weather and light gravity. They had no large predators. Their worst disease was similar to a human cold. The idea of a species that evolved fighting for survival every day was completely foreign to him. Dr. Susan Clark joined the conversation from the medical bay. She asked Vale about Valari physical capabilities. Vale described a species that stood about 5 feet tall, with thin bones and light muscles. Their gravity was about half of Earth's. They could see in low light but had poor hearing. Their bodies were fragile compared to most species, which was why they had focused on technology and trade instead of exploration or military strength. Susan felt a surge of protective anger. These people were being destroyed by bullies and no one had helped them. She told Captain Wright that the Valari reminded her of children who needed adults to protect them from danger. Jake Bennett finished his tactical analysis and presented it to the command staff. The Krathun followed predictable patterns, blockading planets from orbit while bombing key locations. They expected surrender within weeks. When species resisted, the Krathun simply increased the bombing until resistance collapsed. They had never faced an enemy that fought back effectively. Captain Wright asked Vale how many Valari remained. Vale's voice broke as he answered. Of 4 billion people, only about 300 million survived. Most were hiding in underground shelters on the homeworld, or in secret bases scattered across the system. They had little food and no hope. Many had already chosen to end their lives rather than face Krathun enslavement. The crew of the Valkyrie sat in stunned silence. 3.5 billion people dead, and no one in the galaxy had lifted a finger to help. Commander Jack Morrison stood up and spoke quietly. He said they had to act fast. Every day they waited, more Valari died. Captain Wright agreed, but knew they needed a solid plan. The Valkyrie was one ship against 12. Even with superior technology, they could be overwhelmed. He called his senior officers together for a strategy meeting. Jake Bennett suggested a lightning strike. Hit the Krathun hard and fast before they could organize a defense. Use the Valkyrie's speed and maneuverability to take out multiple targets quickly. The Krathun expected enemies to either run away or surrender. They would not be ready for a ship that attacked with fury. Dr. Helen Foster worried about the moral implications. Once they attacked, Earth would be at war with the Krathun Dominion. This could bring the conflict to human space. Captain Wright acknowledged her concerns but said some things were worth fighting for. The Valari were dying, and humanity had the power to stop it. Amy Rodriguez made an important observation. The Krathun had been sending regular reports back to their command. If those reports suddenly stopped, reinforcements would come. They had to assume this was the first battle in a longer war. Captain Wright agreed and began planning for what would come after the first strike. Vale contacted them again with new information. The Krathun were planning a final assault on the main Valari shelter city in 3 days. After that, they expected full surrender. The timeline was now critical. The Valkyrie had to act immediately or there would be no one left to save. Captain Wright made his decision. They would attack at dawn, using the planet's rotation to mask their approach. The crew had 1 day to prepare. Every weapon would be checked and loaded. Every system would be tested. They would practice combat maneuvers until everyone knew their role perfectly. The crew of the Valkyrie worked through the night without complaint. They knew what was at stake. In the morning, they would show the Krathun Dominion something they had never seen before. They would face humans, the Deathworlders from Earth, fighting to protect the innocent. The Valkyrie moved through the darkness of space like a hunting predator. Captain Daniel Wright sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display show the Krathun ships in their orbital positions. The enemy vessels were arranged in a loose blockade pattern, confident that no threat would come. They had been doing this for 3 months, and no one had challenged them. Greg Palmer sat at the sensor station feeding constant updates to the rest of the crew. He had plotted the exact position of every Krathun ship, weapons platform, and communication relay. The humans had studied their enemies' patterns and found weaknesses in their formation. The Krathen left gaps in their coverage, never imagining anyone would be bold enough to exploit them. Lieutenant Nicole Grant sat at the pilot's station, her hands steady on the controls. She had practiced the attack approach dozens of times in simulation. The maneuver she was about to attempt would subject the crew to acceleration forces that would kill most alien species. But humans had evolved on a high-gravity world. There, bodies could take punishment that would tear apart the Valari or Krathun. The Valkyrie came around the planet's dark side using the world itself as cover. The Krathun's sensors were pointed outward, watching for threats from deep space. They never considered that an attack might come from the planet they were besieging. It was a fundamental failure of imagination that was about to cost them dearly. Weapons Officer Carlos Martinez had every gun and missile tube ready. The Valkyrie carried weapons that combined human creativity with cutting-edge technology. Railguns that could fire metal slugs at incredible speeds. Plasma torpedoes that burned hotter than a star's surface. Nuclear missiles designed for ship-to-ship combat. The Krathen had never faced weapons like these. Captain Wright opened a communication channel to the Krathen flagship. He wanted to give them one chance to leave peacefully. The Krathun admiral appeared on the screen, looking almost amused. The admiral was a large creature with thick armor plates covering his body. He spoke through a translation program, his voice full of arrogance. The Krathun admiral demanded to know what primitive species dared to approach his fleet. Captain Wright identified himself as a representative of Earth and demanded the Krathen leave Valari space immediately. The admiral laughed, a harsh sound that grated on human ears. He said Earth meant nothing to him, one more primitive world to conquer later. He ordered the Valkyrie to surrender or be destroyed. Captain Wright's face remained calm, but his eyes were cold. He said the Krathen had 1 minute to begin retreating. The admiral laughed again and cut the communication. He turned to his weapons officer and ordered them to destroy the human ship. It would be a lesson to others who thought about resisting. The Krathun fired first, just as Captain Wright expected. Energy beams lanced through space toward the Valkyrie, but Nicole was already moving, executing a roll that took the ship out of the firing line. The Krathun beams hit nothing but empty space. Before the Krathun could adjust their aim, the Valkyrie fired back. Carlos unleashed hell. Railgun rounds tore through the shields of the nearest Krathun ship like they were paper. The kinetic energy was something the Krathen shields were never designed to stop. Metal slugs moving at thousands of miles per second punched through the hull and exploded inside the ship. Secondary explosions rippled through the Krathen vessel as power systems failed and ammunition stores detonated. The first Krathen ship died in less than 30 seconds. The crew never had time to evacuate or send a distress call. The Valkyrie was already moving to its next target, Nicole pushing the engines to their limits. The ship accelerated at forces that pressed the human crew back into their seats, but left them still functional and alert. Plasma torpedoes streaked from the Valkyrie's launch tubes, tracking 2 more Krathun vessels. The torpedoes were smaller than the Krathun ships, but far more maneuverable. Krathun point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but the torpedoes dodged and weaved. When they hit, they burned through armor and hull like acid. 2 more Krathun ships were crippled in the opening minute of combat. The Krathun fleet began to react, but they were slow and confused. They had expected an easy fight against a single ship. Instead, they were being torn apart by weapons and tactics they did not understand. The Krathun admiral screamed orders, demanding his ships form a defensive formation. But the Valkyrie was already among them, too close for the Krathun to use their heavy weapons without risking friendly fire. Jake Bennett coordinated the attack from his tactical station, identifying which targets were most dangerous and which were already disabled. He fed targeting data to Carlos, ensuring every shot counted. Human military doctrine emphasized efficiency. Never waste ammunition. Make every attack serve multiple purposes. The Krathen fought like they had endless resources and time. The humans fought like their lives depended on every decision, because they did. 3 more Krathen ships tried to flee, their captains realizing this was a fight they could not win. Captain Wright ordered Carlos to let them go after disabling their weapons. The fleeing ships could carry a message back to the Krathun Dominion. Earth was not a species to be trifled with, but 6 Krathun ships remained, and their admiral refused to retreat. He had sent a message to Krathun Command calling for reinforcements. He just needed to keep the human ship occupied until help arrived. The Krathun ships began firing wildly, trying to overwhelm the Valkyrie with sheer volume of fire. Nicole danced. The Valkyrie threw the energy beams like she was born to it. She used the orbital mechanics of the planet to slingshot around, building speed and changing direction in ways that seemed impossible. The Krathun captains watched in horror as the human ship moved with grace and violence combined. Commander, Jack Morrison monitored damage reports from all sections of the ship. The Valkyrie had taken a few hits, but nothing critical. Human engineering emphasized redundancy and repair. One hit would not stop them. Even major damage could be worked around. The crew knew how to adapt and overcome. Captain Wright made a bold decision. He ordered Ryan Foster to prepare the boarding teams. Ryan was a Marine commander who led 200 combat troops aboard the Valkyrie. His soldiers were trained for ship-to-ship fighting, ready to take the battle directly to the enemy. Ryan smiled when he got the order. His team had been itching for action. Boarding pods launched from the Valkyrie, small armored craft that could latch onto enemy hulls and cut through. The Krathun tried to shoot them down, but the pods were fast and heavily shielded. They reached 3 different Krathun ships and burned through the outer armor. Ryan led the first team through the breach. The inside of the Krathun ship was hot and dimly lit, designed for a species that liked higher temperatures. Ryan and his Marines wore powered armor that protected them from the environment and enhanced their strength. They moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. The Krathun crew tried to fight back, but they were not prepared for human combat tactics. Ryan's team used grenades, automatic weapons, and close combat techniques that the Krathun had never encountered. Within 20 minutes, Ryan's team had captured the engine room and disabled the ship. The other boarding teams reported similar success. The Krathun admiral realized his fleet was destroyed. 6 ships gone, 3 captured, 3 fleeing in disgrace. His own flagship was surrounded by the Valkyrie's weapons, all of them pointed at his bridge. The admiral sent a surrender message, unable to believe what had happened. Captain Wright accepted the surrender but gave the admiral a message to take back to his superiors. Earth had come to protect the Valari, and any Krathun ship that returned to this system would be destroyed. The age of the Krathun Dominion's unopposed conquest was over. Down on the planet's surface, the Valari watched from their shelters as the orbital bombardment suddenly stopped. They saw Krathun ships burning in the sky or fleeing into deep space. Vale sent a message to the Valkyrie, his voice filled with emotions he could not express. His people were free, saved by aliens from a world they had never heard of until a week ago. The crew of the Valkyrie allowed themselves a moment of celebration, but Captain Wright knew this was just the beginning. The Krathun would return with more ships. The real war was about to start. Captain Daniel Wright stood in the command center of the Valkyrie, looking at the tactical map of nearby star systems. The 3 Krathun ships that had fled were heading back to their staging base, only 2 systems away. Jack Morrison stood beside him, both men thinking the same thing. The Krathun would regroup and come back with overwhelming force, unless someone stopped them first. Daniel made a decision that surprised some of his officers. Instead of staying to defend the Valari homeworld, they would hunt the Krathun back to their base. The best defense was a strong offense, and predators understood only one thing: strength. If Earth showed weakness now, the Krathun would see them as just another species to conquer. But if humans pursued the enemy aggressively, it would change everything. Jack supported the decision immediately. He had studied Earth's military history and knew that waiting for the enemy to attack on their terms was a mistake. Better to keep them off balance, scared, and reacting instead of planning. The Valkyrie would follow the fleeing Krathun ships and strike at their base before reinforcements could be organized. Lieutenant Maya Cooper worked at the intelligence station, intercepting Krathun communications. Maya was an expert at breaking enemy codes and understanding their communication patterns. She listened to the panicked messages going back and forth between the fleeing ships and their command. The Krathun were terrified. They kept using a phrase that translated roughly as Deathworld predators. They had never encountered a species like humans before. The Valkyrie tracked the Krathan ships to a system with 3 rocky planets and no intelligent life. The Krathan had built a military base on the largest moon, using it as a staging ground for their conquests in this region of space. Scanner readings showed dozens of ships at the base, along with fuel depots, weapons platforms, and what looked like prison facilities. Dr. Helen Foster studied the base layout and noticed something that made her heart ache. The prison facilities held thousands of captives from various species. The Krathan used slave labor to build their ships and mine resources. Some prisoners had been there for years, working until they died from exhaustion or disease. Helen showed her findings to Captain Wright, and his expression hardened. Daniel ordered the Valkyrie to approach the base carefully. They needed intelligence before attacking. Greg Palmer used long-range sensors to map every detail of the enemy installation. He found anti-ship batteries, shield generators, and patrol ships. The base was designed to withstand attacks from conventional forces. But the Valkyrie was anything but conventional. Nicole Grant piloted the ship through the asteroid field surrounding the moon, using the rocks as cover. She moved slowly and quietly, keeping the Valkyrie's energy signature low. The Krathan sensors never detected them. The humans observed the base for 8 hours, learning patrol schedules and identifying weak points in the defenses. Ryan Foster prepared his Marines for another assault. This time they would be going in without ship support initially. The plan was to land small teams near the prison facilities, free the captives, and cause chaos inside the base. While the Krathan dealt with that problem, the Valkyrie would attack their ships and destroy their ability to launch a counterattack. The attack began at what passed for midnight in the base's time schedule. 3 teams of Marines landed in stealth pods, touching down near different sections of the prison complex. Ryan led the first team himself, cutting through security fences and taking out guards before they could raise an alarm. Inside the prison, Ryan and his team found conditions worse than they had imagined. Prisoners were kept in tiny cells with little food or medical care. Many were sick or injured. Some had been tortured for refusing to work. Ryan felt rage building inside him but kept his focus on the mission. His team moved through the facility, opening cells and directing prisoners to the landing zones where transport ships would evacuate them. The freed prisoners were terrified at first, seeing armed humans in combat armor. They had learned to fear anything military. But when Corporal Lisa Morgan knelt beside an injured alien child and began treating her wounds with gentle hands, the prisoners began to understand. These humans were not like the Krathan. They were rescuers, not conquerors. Maya Cooper had hacked into the base's communication system and began broadcasting a message to all the prisoners in multiple languages. She told them that help had arrived from Earth, that they were being freed, and that they should move toward the marked evacuation points. The message spread through the prison complex like wildfire. Thousands of prisoners began moving at once, overwhelming the Krathan guards. The Krathan base commander realized something was wrong when his prison facilities erupted in chaos. He ordered his guards to restore order, but then his external sensors detected the Valkyrie. The human ship had emerged from the asteroid field and was moving toward his docked vessels. The Krathan commander split his forces, sending some to deal with the prison riot and others to defend the ships. It was exactly what Captain Wright wanted. A divided enemy was a weak enemy. Carlos Martinez opened fire on the docked Krathan vessels, destroying them before they could launch. Railgun rounds tore through ships that were loaded with fuel and ammunition. Explosions rippled across the base's landing platforms. Within minutes, the Krathan had lost half their fleet without firing a shot. The Krathan commander ordered his remaining ships to launch immediately, even though they were not fully prepared. Better to fight in space than be destroyed on the ground. 6 Krathan warships lifted off from the base, their shields flickering as they powered up. Nicole Grant was ready for them, positioning the Valkyrie to control the high ground. The battle in space was brutal but short. The Krathan ships were undermanned and poorly coordinated. The Valkyrie picked them apart one by one, using superior weapons and tactics. Jake Bennett coordinated the attack perfectly, ensuring the Valkyrie was never caught in a crossfire. Within an hour, all 6 Krathan ships were destroyed or disabled. Down on the base, Ryan's teams had secured the prison complex and were loading prisoners onto transport ships. The Krathan guards had surrendered when they realized they were surrounded by heavily armed humans who fought like nothing they had ever seen. Ryan ordered his Marines to treat the prisoners with care, but keep the Krathen guards under strict watch. One of the freed prisoners approached Dr. Helen Foster with information. He was a scholar from a species called the Nixari, and he had been imprisoned for refusing to build weapons for the Krathun. He told Helen that the Krathen Dominion controlled 15 systems through fear. No species had ever successfully resisted because everyone assumed the Krathun were invincible. But now, word was spreading through Krathen space about the humans. The Empire was starting to crack. Captain Wright interrogated the captured Krathen base commander in the detention cell. The alien was defiant at first, claiming the Dominion would crush Earth and enslave all humans. But when Daniel calmly explained how the Valkyrie had destroyed 2 Krathen fleets in less than a week, the commander's confidence wavered. Daniel asked why the Krathen conquered other species. The commander seemed confused by the question. He said it was what powerful species did. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order of the universe. Daniel told him that humans saw things differently. Power came with responsibility. The strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. The Krathen commander could not understand this philosophy. In his mind, strength was for taking what you wanted. Showing mercy was weakness. Daniel realized that trying to reason with him was pointless. Some beings had to be stopped, not convinced. He asked the commander one final question. Where was the central command station for the Krathun Dominion? At first, the commander refused to answer, but Maya Cooper had already been working on hacking the base computers. She found star charts and communication logs that revealed the location of the Dominion's capital system. It was 3 jumps away, heavily defended by the main Krathen fleet. Taking the fight there would be extremely dangerous. Captain Wright called a meeting of his senior officers. They had freed thousands of slaves and destroyed a major Krathen base. They could go home now, declare victory, and wait for Earth to send more ships. But they all knew what would happen if they left. The Krathen would rebuild, regroup, and come back stronger. The only way to end this war was to strike at the heart of the Dominion. Jack Morrison said what everyone was thinking. They had to finish this. One ship against the Krathen capital seemed like suicide, but they had already done impossible things. The freed prisoners could spread the word about Earth throughout the galaxy. Other species might find courage to resist if they saw humans leading the way. Daniel made his decision. They would continue to the Krathen capital, but first he sent a message to Earth through the emergency communication relay. Admiral Patricia Cole needed to know what they were doing and why. If the Valkyrie did not return, Earth would need to prepare for war. The Valkyrie approached the Krathun capital system with caution, knowing this would be the most dangerous battle yet. Captain Daniel Wright studied the tactical display showing the massive fortress station orbiting the Krathun homeworld. The station was 10 times larger than any structure humans had built in space, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a fleet of 40 warships. But the Valkyrie was not alone anymore. 2 more Earth ships had arrived after receiving emergency calls for support. The EDF Thunderbird was a heavy cruiser commanded by Captain George Mitchell, a veteran known for aggressive tactics. The EDF Phoenix was a fast attack ship under Captain Rachel Stone, who had won medals for her brilliant strategic thinking. Together, the 3 human vessels formed a small but deadly force. The 3 captains held a strategy meeting through video communication. George wanted to hit the Krathen hard and fast, just like at the Valari homeworld. Rachel suggested they use the asteroid field near the capital planet as cover and launch surprise attacks. Daniel agreed with both approaches but added that they needed to do more than just win the battle. They needed to break the Krathen's will to fight. Maya Cooper had intercepted more Krathen communications during the journey. The messages revealed panic spreading through the Dominion. The freed slaves from the prison base had begun broadcasting testimonies about human intervention. Species that had been enslaved for decades were hearing stories about the Deathworlders from Earth, who fought to protect others. Some enslaved populations were organizing resistance movements, inspired by humanity's actions. The Krathen leadership had sent orders to all their forces to destroy these human ships at any cost. The Dominion could not allow a primitive species to challenge their authority. If humans succeeded, it would encourage rebellion throughout Krathen space. The Empire would collapse from within. The Krathen fleet at the capital was under direct orders to fight to the death. Dr. Helen Foster had been working with the freed prisoners, learning about other species suffering under Krathen rule. She discovered that rebellions were already starting on 3 Krathan-controlled worlds. Slaves were sabotaging factories, destroying supply lines, and freeing other prisoners. The Krathun military was stretched thin trying to control these uprisings while preparing to fight Earth's ships. Captain Wright realized this was the key to victory. The 3 human ships could not defeat 40 Krathan vessels through direct combat alone, but they could be the spark that ignited a wildfire of rebellion. He contacted the resistance movements through secret channels, coordinating their attacks to coincide with the human assault on the capital. The battle plan was risky but elegant. The 3 Earth ships would strike at the Krathun fortress station, drawing the fleet's attention. While the Krathun focused on the humans, resistance movements would attack military installations throughout the Dominion. The Krathun leadership would be forced to choose between fighting the humans or controlling their crumbling empire. The attack began at dawn over the Krathun capital world. The Thunderbird emerged from the asteroid field first, broadcasting a message to the Krathun fleet. Captain George Mitchell's voice was calm but firm. He demanded the Krathun surrender their war criminals, free all slaves, and dismantle their military empire. The response was immediate. The Krathun flagship opened fire with everything it had. George was ready. The Thunderbird's heavy shields absorbed the first volley while Nicole Grant brought the Valkyrie around from a different angle. The Phoenix appeared from above, completing the encirclement. 3 human ships against 40 Krathun vessels. The odds looked impossible, but the humans had advantages the Krathun did not understand. Carlos Martinez coordinated weapons fire between all 3 ships. Human vessels could share targeting data instantly, acting as one unified force. When the Valkyrie fired its railguns at a Krathun ship, the Thunderbird would follow up with missiles, and the Phoenix would finish the target with plasma torpedoes. The Krathun ships fought individually, each captain trying to win glory for himself. The space around the capital planet became a maze of fire and metal. Nicole pushed the Valkyrie through impossible maneuvers, using the moon's gravity to slingshot around and gain speed. Rachel Stone matched her move for move in the Phoenix, the 2 ships working together like dancers in a deadly performance. The Krathun captains tried to follow but could not match the precision of human coordination. Jake Bennett managed the tactical situation from his station, tracking 40 enemy ships simultaneously. He identified which Krathun vessels were the most dangerous and which were already damaged. Human efficiency meant nothing was wasted. Every shot had a purpose. Every maneuver served multiple goals. The Krathun fought with brute force. The humans fought with deadly intelligence. Then the fortress station opened fire. Its main weapon was a massive energy beam that could destroy a ship in one hit. The beam lanced toward the Valkyrie, bright enough to blind sensors. But Lieutenant Paul Davis had been monitoring the station's power fluctuations. He gave Nicole a 3-second warning. She rolled the ship sideways and the beam passed through empty space where the Valkyrie had been moments before. Commander Jack Morrison saw an opportunity. The fortress had to recharge between shots, leaving it vulnerable. He suggested they focus all 3 ships on destroying the station's weapon. Once that threat was gone, they could deal with the fleet more easily. Daniel agreed and sent the order to George and Rachel. The 3 Earth ships converged on the fortress station, ignoring the Krathun fleet for a critical minute. Railguns hammered the station's weapon array while missiles punched through its armor. The Krathun tried desperately to protect their fortress, but their ships were too slow to intercept. The station's main weapon exploded in a brilliant flash, taking out several nearby Krathun vessels in the blast. The Krathun admiral realized he was losing. His fleet was being torn apart by 3 ships. The fortress station was crippled, and now reports were coming in from across the Dominion. Slave rebellions had erupted on 8 worlds simultaneously. Supply lines were cut. Communication relays were destroyed. The Krathun Dominion was collapsing. Captain Wright opened a channel to the Krathun admiral and offered surrender terms. Stop fighting immediately, free all slaves, and face justice for war crimes. The alternative was total destruction. The admiral refused, screaming that the Krathun would never bow to primitive Deathworlders. Daniel sighed and closed the channel. Some people had to learn the hard way. The battle continued for 3 more hours. The human ships took damage but kept fighting. Ryan Foster led damage control teams through the Valkyrie, repairing systems while the ship was still in combat. Human adaptability was on full display. A Krathun ship with damaged engines would retreat. A human ship with the same damage would keep fighting and find another way to contribute. Slowly, the Krathun fleet was destroyed or disabled. Some ships tried to flee, but Rachel Stone's Phoenix was faster. She hunted down the runners, forcing them to surrender or die. George Mitchell's Thunderbird broke through the enemy formation and positioned itself between the Krathun homeworld and the remaining military ships. The message was clear: surrender or watch your world burn. Finally, with only 12 ships left, the Krathun admiral surrendered. His voice was broken with shame and disbelief. How could 40 ships lose to 3? Daniel did not gloat. He simply accepted the surrender and gave orders for the Krathun crews to evacuate their ships. The vessels would be taken as prizes and studied. Admiral Patricia Cole arrived with a larger Earth fleet 2 days later. She had brought 10 more warships and several support vessels. The sight of an entire Earth battle group emerging from faster-than-light travel struck fear into every Krathun who saw it. Patricia met with the Krathun leadership and laid out Earth's terms. The Krathun Dominion would be dissolved. All enslaved species would be freed immediately. Krathun where criminals would face trial. The Krathun homeworld would be allowed to keep a small defense force but no offensive military. Earth would guarantee the safety and freedom of all species in this region of space. Any future aggression would be met with overwhelming force. The Krathun leadership had no choice but to accept. Their fleet was destroyed. Their empire was in ruins. Rebellions had succeeded on every enslaved world. The age of Krathun domination was over, ended by a species from a distant Deathworld who refused to ignore a cry for help. Vale and other Valari representatives came to meet the human fleet. They brought gifts of art and technology, though they knew nothing they offered could truly repay the debt. Captain Wright told them that no payment was necessary. Helping others was not a transaction. It was simply the right thing to do. Dr. Helen Foster worked with freed species from across the former Dominion to establish new governments and trade relationships. The galaxy was entering a new era. Species that had lived in fear for centuries now had hope, and at the center of that hope stood humanity. The Deathworlders who combined savage fighting ability with genuine compassion. Captain Daniel Wright stood on the observation deck of the Valkyrie, looking at the stars. Jack Morrison joined him, both men tired but satisfied. Jack asked if Daniel thought the Krathun had learned their lesson. Daniel said he hoped so, but it did not really matter. Earth would